After his wife's funeral, the husband and his mistress went to the lawyer's office for his wife's inheritance, but when they arrived, surprise awaited them. Mason had married Olivia 3 years ago. Truthfully, he would never have married her if she hadn't become the sole owner of her late father's tech company. After her father's sudden passing, a man known to be vibrant and energetic, a heart attack claimed him without warning. Olivia was Mr. Bennett's only child and sole heir to everything. That was exactly why Mason, attractive but lazy, a man used to living off wealthy women, set his sights on her. Olivia fell for Mason's sweet promises, while he secretly planned to stay only until something better came along. But soon enough, he realized that Olivia herself was the jackpot. She inherited a vast fortune, and Mason knew precisely how to exploit it. He thought it would be easy to use her deep love for him to control her wealth, and for a while, everything worked out perfectly for Mason. Olivia, devastated by her father's death, the man who had always been her rock, found comfort in Mason's constant presence and support. The young, innocent woman had no idea that the darkest time of her life allowed Mason to hide his true colors completely, at least until they were legally bound. Mason kept up the act flawlessly, making sure there was no turning back after the funeral. He proposed, but suggested, naturally, that they wait until her mourning period for her father was over. Mason was an expert liar, manipulator, and chameleon. He could become whoever he needed to be to please his rich girlfriends. Usually, he didn't bother too much, figuring there was always another wealthy woman somewhere. But with Olivia, he knew this effort would pay off. His patience wouldn't go unrewarded, and the cunning man understood that well. However, an obstacle came up unexpectedly from someone Mason never saw coming. Olivia's father's best friend, and also his most trusted advisor at the company, was her godfather, Mr. Harrison. He quickly realized Olivia was deeply in love and nothing would stop her from marrying Mason. Her grief made her crave a replacement father figure. Still, Mr. Harrison, shrewd and protective, pushed hard for a prenuptial agreement and eventually convinced Olivia to agree. "Mason, it's just for business," Olivia repeated what Mr. Harrison had told her. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice soft but unsure. "This is humiliating. You think I need your money?" Mason snapped back, pretending to be offended. "Sweetheart, it's just a formality," he said, forcing a gentle smile. "We'd only need it if we ever split up. My godfather just wants to protect you. He's always been like a second father to me." Olivia might have been inexperienced when it came to money. She never really had to worry about it. But she wasn't naive in other parts of her life. Once she set her mind to something, she made it happen. Mason had no choice but to accept every single condition Mr. Harrison laid out. The marriage agreement looked simple at first glance, but left Mason with almost no legal rights at all. It was crystal clear that the company and every asset Olivia inherited from her father would never become shared property. Mason assumed he'd get a slice of the profits and maybe use that to buy more things for himself. But the contract, drawn up by a top-tier attorney, made sure that was impossible. Still, Mason convinced himself the marriage would be worth it. He thought he could tap into Olivia's accounts behind her back and slowly build up a hidden stash for himself. He planned to skim small amounts from their household budget every day and funnel it into an account under his name. But Mason misjudged that too. Mr. Harrison was a trustworthy, upright man who oversaw not just Olivia's company finances, but also her personal spending. Mason's access to cash was limited to minor personal expenses, but he kept telling himself the situation would turn around soon enough. He didn't have to wait long to feel like luck was finally on his side. From the first day of their marriage, Olivia desperately wanted to become a mother. But month after month, her hopes crashed down. At first, she blamed the stress of juggling work and managing her father's company on her own. It drained her completely, and after a year of heartbreak, she turned to medical specialists. At night, Olivia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, silently praying for a miracle she no longer had the strength to believe in. Each failed attempt broke a piece of her resolve, yet every morning she forced herself to smile for the world, and especially for the man she thought would stand by her side. In those moments alone, tears often soaked her pillow, while Mason slept soundly beside her, oblivious and uncaring. Once, at her lowest, Olivia nearly called the clinic to stop everything. She had typed out a message saying she didn't want any more tests, any more needles, any more false hope. But her thumb hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity before she deleted it. She could never bring herself to give up completely, at least not yet. She went through every test, hoping for an answer. What she thought was just exhaustion turned out to be far worse. Her body had been giving her warnings she chose to ignore. In the end, the doctors told her the unthinkable. It was cancer. When the doctor uttered the word, Olivia's mind went blank. Her throat tightened until she could barely breathe. She nodded numbly, clutching the edge of her chair so she wouldn't collapse under the weight of a future she never imagined. A future without children, without time, and without the husband she once thought was her safe place. Olivia endured almost 2 years of painful treatments that didn't work. Through it all, Mason played the part of devoted husband, only on the surface. Deep down, he wished Olivia would just vanish, and he couldn't even hide that truth well enough. Though they never said it out loud, Olivia knew exactly how many other women her husband slept with behind her back. Mason thought he was clever, fooling everyone while waiting for his dying wife to free up his ticket to an easy life. He believed he was untouchable, the perfect fraud. But everyone else saw right through him, from the nurses who looked after Olivia in the hospital to Mr. Harrison himself. Mr. Harrison was furious and helpless. He couldn't understand why Olivia was so determined to keep her marriage intact even as she lay on her deathbed. What troubled him even more was that Olivia had never written a will, which meant her husband, that scoundrel Mason, would automatically inherit everything. Her father's legacy, her hard work, all of it squandered within a few short years. Mr. Harrison knew exactly the kind of man Mason was, reckless, greedy, and wasteful. It broke the old man's heart every time he sat by Olivia's bed, watching her fragile hands struggle to pour tea for him like she used to when she was healthy. He fought the urge to beg her one more time, "Please, don't leave everything to that snake." But each time he opened his mouth, her tired eyes met his with a calm so fierce he swallowed his words. The helplessness weighed on his chest like a stone he could not move. But the old man was torn about how to raise such a delicate topic with his goddaughter. Just months ago she had seemed vibrant and full of life, and now there was no hope left. She was dying, and it would happen soon, a matter of weeks. Meanwhile, Mason was already rubbing his hands together, eyes glinting at the thought of finally being free of his sick wife and swimming in wealth. To him, everything was set. Mr. Harrison prayed he wouldn't have to bring up the will himself. And thankfully, he didn't have to. Olivia began the conversation on her own, unveiling a secret plan that left him stunned. She had arranged every detail with quiet precision and icy resolve. Revenge truly was a dish best served cold, and Olivia delivered it flawlessly. Her plan didn't take much time or effort to pull off, but by the time she closed her eyes for the last time, she had protected what mattered most. Sadly, those who loved her didn't get a miracle. Olivia passed away without ever recovering. She arranged every part of her funeral herself. Calm and unwavering, she made sure her final wishes were clear. The day after her farewell ceremony, the lawyer called in everyone named in Olivia's will and asked them to be present for the reading. Mason was blindsided. He had been so sure Olivia hadn't left behind any official paperwork, which meant, by default, he would get everything. Still clinging to that hope, he walked into the lawyer's office, hand in hand with his new lover Vanessa, a striking beauty. As they stepped inside, Mason immediately noticed Mr. Harrison and Olivia's close friend, Connor Hayes. But what made him freeze was that Connor wasn't alone. He was gently pushing a baby stroller with a toddler inside. Mason had no clue Connor had gotten married or even had a child. And while Mason was no genius, he certainly wasn't stupid. It didn't take him long to see that something was up, and he'd walked straight into a trap. Despite the growing dread twisting in his gut, curiosity got the better of him. He needed to know what Olivia had done behind his back. But one thing was clear. Whatever it was, it would humiliate him in front of everyone. For about 15 minutes, the room stayed awkwardly silent. Each person sat in a different corner, waiting. Nobody else showed up. The lawyer seemed to stretch out the introduction as long as possible, explaining why they had been gathered and how it was an honor to read the last words of the deceased. The lawyer announced it with a subtle, almost smug smile, hinting that he and everyone else in the room already knew exactly what was coming. Finally, Mason heard his name. "To my lawful husband, Mason, I deny the inheritance," read the lawyer, his voice calm but cutting. Then he looked directly at Mason and asked if he understood what that meant. The humiliated man had no choice but to nod. Right then, Vanessa gripped his hand, ready to storm out with him in a show of defiance. But Mason yanked his hand away, ignoring her confused glare. He wanted nothing more than to escape this nightmare. But the scene wasn't over yet, and the audience needed to see every moment. After a short pause, the lawyer continued reading. "I leave all my personal property to my only son, Tommy Hayes. Until he reaches adulthood, I appoint his father, Connor Hayes, and Mr. Harrison as guardians and administrators of his estate." The shock hit Mason like a sucker punch to the gut. A son? Connor's son? He snapped, his composure shattering as he shouted in disbelief, startling Vanessa and everyone around him. But nobody else in the room looked surprised. "The boy is Olivia's biological child," Mr. Deglet Harrison confirmed calmly. Mason gasped, his voice cracking as he blurted out, "But she hasn't been pregnant in 2 years." "That's true," Mr. Harrison said, relishing Mason's horror. "Thanks to modern medicine. She preserved her eggs before her treatments began. She wanted to be a mother, no matter what." Connor remembered all too well the day Olivia had told him, 2 years ago, that she was terminally ill. He'd been devastated, but she'd spoken with quiet strength about the little time she had left and what she needed to do before she was gone. "I stored my eggs before I started chemo," she'd said softly. "The doctor said I probably couldn't carry my own child, but I wouldn't let that stop me. Connor, I grew up without a mom. It was hard, but you always loved and protected me. I know it's asking a lot, but—" Connor had asked cautiously, "Does Mason know you want to have a baby this way?" Olivia had laughed bitterly. Who would trust him to raise a baby alone? He'd just spend the baby's money without a second thought. "No, I've realized exactly what kind of person my dear husband is, and I don't even want to waste words on him." Connor had fallen silent, but Olivia had pushed through her nerves, something rare for her. "What I really want to ask is, would you be the father of my child?" she exclaimed in a high, shaky voice. "Are you serious?" Connor, clearly caught off guard, replied, "Olivia, you have a husband." "Yes, I have a husband. Until the day I die. I've already decided this," she said calmly. "Of course, you and I won't sleep together. That's out of the question. I can't carry the baby myself anymore, but I preserved my eggs before my treatment, and now all we need is the biological father's part." She continued without hesitation. "Naturally, we also need a woman to carry and deliver the baby, but thankfully, these services exist now." At first, Connor thought this was absurd, the desperate idea of a dying woman clinging to a fantasy. But Olivia had planned everything logically and had already laid most of the groundwork. She'd researched the legal side, arranged everything with a fertility clinic, and even lined up a surrogate mother. "Connor, I could use a donor," Olivia admitted. "But I don't want just any man. I want to leave behind a part of myself and know who will raise my child. I've thought it through again and again, and you're the only person I can trust. I know you'll be an amazing father. I know you probably want your own family one day, to marry and have children the usual way, and that makes sense. But please, just think about it. Don't say anything yet." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "After what Mason did to me, I want the father of my child to be someone who doesn't care about money, who would never use my wealth for himself. I'm not naive anymore. Mason taught me a hard lesson, and now I know better." Connor stayed silent as Olivia went on, her voice steady. "You don't need my money. You've built your own success. You worked day and night to keep the company strong when my father got sick. You've never asked me for anything. I know one thing for sure. A man who grew up with nothing will never stop worrying about having enough. And if he's also morally weak, that's a disaster. I lived through that already." Connor's hands trembled slightly as he listened. 1,000 thoughts tangled in his mind, loyalty, fear, and a guilt he couldn't name. His chest tightened painfully at the idea of raising Olivia's child while watching her slip away day by day. He wanted to say no, to tell her this was too much. But one look at her fragile smile stole every excuse from him. A quiet terror crawled through him. What if I fail her? What if one day this baby looks at me and hates me for not saving her, for not being enough? He swallowed hard, pushing the fear down, but it clung to him like a shadow. Connor let out a slow exhale. Honestly, Olivia, I don't know what to say. This is so much. I always pictured becoming a dad in a completely different way. I can't decide this alone. I need to talk to my parents. They deserve to know, and I need their advice. Olivia nodded, completely understanding. Her only request was that Connor promise to keep everything private. When Connor finally spoke with his parents, it wasn't easy. His father listened without interrupting, absorbing every detail. When Connor finished explaining, his father placed a steady hand on his shoulder and said he would stand by his son's decision and help however he could to support his future grandchild. Connor's mother, however, wasn't quite as accepting. Like many mothers, she had always dreamed her son would marry a good woman and have children the traditional way. She had known Olivia since she was a little girl and had always admired her. But this request was hard to accept. That her grandchild's biological mother was dying, and the baby would be carried by another woman. Her fingers twisted the corner of her apron over and over while she sat at the kitchen table listening to her son. 1,000 questions fought to come out of her mouth, but none seemed kind enough to ask. Her heart ached at the thought of raising a grandchild who might never know his real mother's touch. Could the child inherit the disease? She finally asked, her voice tight, feeling awkward and almost guilty for saying it out loud. But how could she not worry about her grandchild's health? Olivia's cancer isn't hereditary, Connor reassured her, and that answer eased some of her fear, though not all of it. She closed her eyes briefly, pressing her lips together, weighing every nightmare scenario only a mother could imagine. In the end, when she opened her eyes, love won over fear. Still, a small voice in her mind whispered one last worry she couldn't silence. What if Olivia changes her will at the last moment? What if she leaves something unfinished that drags Connor and the baby into another fight with that horrible Mason? She didn't dare say it aloud, but it clung to her thoughts like a splinter she couldn't pull out. After thinking it over, Connor's mother told him she would stand by his decision, no matter how unconventional it was. Connor himself wrestled with doubts. Olivia's proposal had turned his world upside down. Every quiet night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, questioning whether he had the strength to live out her final wish while carrying so much of her pain. But after some quiet reflection, he realized he had no real reason to say no. When he finally told Olivia he agreed, she was overwhelmed with joy, and they started putting the plan into action, step by step, while Connor thought about how deeply this would reshape his life. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison remembered his own conversation with Olivia just a little over 2 months before. She had approached him gently, saying he had always been like a second father to her, and she hoped he wouldn't turn her down. Then she revealed her wish for him to be her child's legal guardian. At first, Mr. Harrison thought his goddaughter must be confused from her illness. But as she explained everything, the old man was stunned. Not only had Olivia and Connor made this bold choice, but they had managed to keep it hidden so well. "How old is the baby now?" Mr. Harrison asked softly. "Tommy is 8 months old," Olivia said, her smile faint but proud. "You two certainly know how to shock me," Mr. Harrison said, still trying to process it all. "I don't want Mason to find out about the baby until after I'm gone," Olivia said firmly. "They'll only learn the truth when my will is read. It's already written and secured with the lawyer. But there's still one thing left to settle. Tommy will have only one father. I've thought this through 100 times. I don't want any loose ends. If something happens to Connor, then Tommy will go to his parents. But I want you to have rights too, just in case," she said. Being a perceptive man, Mr. Harrison understood how risky it was to keep this secret from Mason, even though Mason deserved every bit of betrayal coming his way. "Olivia, are you sure you want to do this to your husband? He's a despicable man, I know. Getting involved with someone like him was your mistake, maybe. But do you really want this revenge from the grave?" he asked gently, then quickly added, "I'm sorry, dear. I didn't mean to be so blunt." Olivia just gave a tired but genuine smile. I've thought it over for a long time. For 2 years, I watched Tommy be born, saw how Connor loves him like his own, and how Connor's parents adore him like he's their flesh and blood. I don't need anything else. I've come to terms with reality, Olivia said softly. What annoys me now is when people go on and on about miracles and sudden cures. And as for Mason, I loved him so much, trusted him completely, but he turned out to be the most thankless, selfish creature alive. She let out a tired laugh. Do you know his girlfriend drives him to the hospital? He acts like visiting me is some awful chore. Mr. Harrison nodded silently, the bitterness clear in his eyes. Inside, the old man's chest tightened with a helpless rage he couldn't show her. He wanted to storm into Mason's house and drag him by the collar, force him to kneel beside Olivia's bed and beg forgiveness. But all he could do was sit there, listening to her broken laughter. And I shouldn't even care, right? Olivia continued, her voice steadier now. But he worships money, so that's how I'll hurt him. It'll be the perfect surprise. You'll see. I kept everything hidden from you too. It was so hard. I wanted to introduce you to my son the moment he was born, but I had to be extra careful so no one would slip up and tell Mason. This is my goodbye to him too. I even wrote him a letter the lawyer will deliver later. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, and for a fleeting moment the strong mask cracked, revealing a young woman who had once dreamed of family dinners, laughter echoing through big empty halls. Now all she had left was a plan to make him pay, a plan she clung to like armor. Mr. Harrison tried more than once to talk his goddaughter out of this plan. He thought it was a risky idea, maybe even unfair, but Olivia refused to change her mind. In the end, he gave up. It was her last wish, and it deserved to be honored. Inside the lawyer's office, the room fell silent again. Everyone sat with their own thoughts swirling. Of course, it didn't take a mind reader to know that Mason was cursing Olivia in every foul way he could think of. Men like him never stop to ask themselves if maybe they're the problem, that other people's actions might be completely justified. But self-reflection is too complicated for someone like him. Why bother blaming yourself? Surprisingly, it was Vanessa who broke the silence. She reached for Mason's arm, trying to tug him toward the door so they could leave. But Mason pulled away. He wasn't done yet. Are you telling me I don't get anything? Not even the minimum share or whatever they call it? I'm her husband, damn it, he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Even Vanessa flinched at his outburst, and the others looked away in disgust. Only the lawyer stayed completely calm. He'd seen this kind of tantrum before. According to the will, you are not among the people entitled to any compulsory portion of her estate. The lawyer explained evenly. And I personally reviewed your marriage contract. A copy is right here. He tapped the thick folder on his desk for emphasis. You have no grounds, even if you go to court. Of course, you are free to try if you wish. Mason's face turned bright red. I'll fight this. I'll contest every word. It's not clear who this illegitimate kid even is. Mason started ranting, completely oblivious to how foolish he sounded. Connor clenched his fists, fighting back the urge to punch him right then and there. Even the normally composed Mr. Harrison turned red with anger. Only the lawyer stayed perfectly calm. For him, this was just another day at work. He replied evenly. Attached here are not only the child's birth certificate but also the medical records explaining everything about his birth. In addition, at the deceased's request, DNA results confirm that your wife is Tommy Hayes' biological mother. All documents were compiled thoroughly and verified. Let me see them, Mason barked. No, the lawyer said firmly. You can review only the portions relevant to you. All other documents, especially anything about the child, can be disclosed only with parental consent. I don't permit it, Connor cut in sharply. Then you'd need to go through the court, if the court even finds it necessary to demand them, the lawyer added, his tone flat. That was too much for Mason. He spun on his heel and stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. He shouted that he'd never let this rest. His girlfriend Vanessa at least had the decency to say goodbye quietly before slipping out behind him, closing the door without a sound. Does it matter that he didn't sign anything acknowledging the will was read to him? Mr. Harrison asked the lawyer. There are plenty like him, the lawyer said with a slight shrug. It's just a formality anyway. Mr. Harrison gave a bitter chuckle. It would be funny if it weren't so pathetic. I still don't understand how Olivia ever got involved with someone like him. He didn't expect an answer, and none came. They signed the remaining paperwork and shook hands. Mr. Harrison then helped Connor secure little Tommy in his stroller. "Want to come with us?" "I'm going to walk a bit. The fresh air is good for him," Connor asked. "Of course, I'll join you for a while," Mr. Harrison agreed. They stepped outside and strolled quietly, listening to the soft rumble of the stroller wheels on the sidewalk. "Do you think Olivia would be happy with how I'm managing all this?" Connor finally asked, voicing the worry that had been gnawing at him. "I know she would be," Mr. Harrison said without hesitation. "You're a wonderful father, and she trusted you with everything." Connor exhaled, but something still tugged at him. "There's one thing I can't shake, though. I think Olivia told you I didn't like how all this went down at the lawyer's office today, making it into a show for Mason to watch. I brought it up more than once. He's just a nasty piece of work, angry, dumb, and greedy. Why poke the bear? To be honest, I almost told him the truth myself once Tommy was born. Olivia hid so much." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "Of course, I remember, but you honored her wishes to the end." "I always felt like I didn't have the right to step in," Connor admitted quietly. "I figured Olivia didn't want to face him alone and left the mess for us to handle. But today, seeing him with that other woman, acting like he had no shame at all, I keep wondering if I should have stood my ground more firmly." His face, his reaction, it was ugly. Maybe it would have been better if we'd cut him off long ago. But maybe Olivia didn't want that either. She wanted her revenge. Because she loved him, no matter what she said later. She loved him deeply once, and that twisted love had nowhere else to go. His voice caught at the word love, and for a second, Connor had to turn away. He hated Mason more than ever, but buried beneath it was a guilt that gnawed at him. That maybe, just maybe, he hadn't protected her enough when she was alive. He sucked in a shaky breath and whispered, almost to himself, "I never told anyone this, but the night she asked me to be the father, I almost packed a bag and disappeared. I wanted to run. I was terrified, selfish. I hated myself for even thinking it. And now, maybe I deserve to feel this regret forever." Mr. Harrison wiped a tear from his cheek, his voice rough with grief. "My poor girl. Don't worry about her now," Connor said gently, trying to comfort Olivia's godfather. "She asked us not to. She wanted all our love to go to Tommy. That's her real legacy." While the two men spoke softly, Mason was parked down the street, watching through the windshield. Inside the car, Vanessa looked at him, wide-eyed. "So you really get nothing out of this?" she asked, blinking rapidly. "You're an idiot if you think there's any chance left after this mess," Mason snapped. "Now come on. We need to grab whatever's still valuable and stash it at my place." 3 days later, Connor finally worked up the nerve to go to Olivia's house. He'd braced for a confrontation and even hired 2 bodyguards just in case. But when he arrived, the house was empty. Mason had beaten him to it. Mason had gone back to the house first, and of course, he hadn't forgotten to help himself to anything valuable he could carry. Now he sat alone in the cramped kitchen of his dingy apartment, nursing cheap whiskey that Vanessa had left behind for him. Naturally, she disappeared too. Why would she stick around for a broke man with nothing to offer? His shoulders slumped, his hair greasy and stuck to his forehead. He mumbled curses into his glass, telling himself over and over that Olivia had ruined him. Not once did he whisper the truth, that he had done it all to himself. Mason stared at the dirty countertop, replaying how he'd landed in this miserable spot. Once, women had paid him in every way to keep him close. Now he'd practically have to pay a pretty girl to pretend she cared. It was almost funny. Mason, the gigolo past his prime, worn down by cheap booze and his own stupidity, still couldn't admit any of this was his fault. In his twisted mind, it was Olivia's doing. She had sucked the life out of him, ruined his plans, and stolen the fortune he was so sure he deserved. He still pictured himself as young, handsome, and rich, a king in waiting. But the truth was cruel. Vanessa had told him before she left, "Nobody wants you now." And for once, Mason had nothing to say back, except to pour another drink and drown in the reality he'd never wanted to face. His dreams of wealth and success, built entirely on his ex-wife's fortune, collapsed like a house of cards. Every fantasy Mason had about becoming a powerful businessman evaporated overnight. But blinded by his own ego, he couldn't see how he was to blame. Instead, in his twisted mind, he blamed Olivia for everything. To Mason, he was the saint who never abandoned his sick wife, completely ignoring his countless affairs, heavy drinking, and the contempt he'd shown her for years. Too bad she's dead, and I can't slap her around now, he thought bitterly. So many times I barely held back, telling myself it'd all be worth it in the end. Mason spent nearly 2 weeks drowning himself in cheap whiskey, trying to block out reality, but every hangover just fed his bitterness. One miserable morning, with his head pounding, he finally decided he'd had enough. He knew he wouldn't get rich or get revenge by sitting drunk in a filthy apartment. Adding insult to injury, just days earlier, men sent by Mr. Harrison had cornered him and forced him to hand over Olivia's car keys, tearing up the power of attorney she'd once given him. "Didn't you know a power of attorney dies with the person who signed it?" one of the men sneered, before leaving him standing there humiliated. Now sober, Mason began obsessing over how he could get back at Olivia, even though she was gone, and what move to make next. At first, a drunken fantasy crossed his mind about vandalizing her grave, but he quickly realized that wouldn't satisfy him. He wanted to hurt her memory where it mattered most. Tommy. A vicious thrill jolted through him the moment the idea took shape. Mason actually laughed out loud, feeling more alive than he had in weeks. He wasn't going to harm the boy physically. No, that wasn't the plan. He knew exactly what would have shattered Olivia if she were still alive, being helpless while her child was in danger. So, from the darkness of his resentment, a plan formed. Kidnap Tommy, take him far away, and abandon him in some orphanage where no one could find him. For the next week, Mason savored this idea like a secret poison, letting it fill him with a twisted sense of triumph. For the first time in ages, he smiled. And the sight of that smile in the mirror was downright unsettling. But Mason didn't care. He felt euphoric. In his mind, he pictured Olivia's torment if she were alive, and he loved every imagined second of it. Once he settled on this revenge, he started planning the logistics. He needed to learn everything about Tommy's daily routine, who took him outside, when, and where. He needed to find the perfect place and moment to strike. Mason knew Connor well enough. They'd been around each other often in the past, and he even knew Connor's parents and where they lived. He remembered that their gated community had tight security. But even knowing the risks, Mason didn't hesitate. He would do whatever it took. In his rotten mind, his plan was justice, and he was determined to see it through. Despite knowing how risky this would be, Mason spent days hidden in the woods, peering through binoculars. He studied every detail of Tommy's daily routine and movements. "Is this worth it?" he asked himself more than once. Absolutely. Since Olivia's will was read, Mason's mind had only unraveled further. "She destroyed my life. Now I'll destroy her son's," he muttered with a low, sinister laugh. If a stranger had stumbled upon him in that moment, they would have been alarmed by how unstable he looked, maybe even tried to help. But this story doesn't allow for wishful thinking. Mason was unstoppable once he set his mind to something, no matter how idiotic or evil it was. So, he prepared. Day after day, he mapped out every detail. He explored the whole area surrounding Connor's house, finding the best hidden spots to watch without being seen. For over a week, Mason woke up at dawn and hurried to the edge of the gated community, staying there until late at night with his binoculars, jotting down notes in a battered notebook to make sure he missed nothing. Through all this spying, Mason learned that Tommy was mainly cared for by Connor's mother and a hired nanny. But Connor's mom was out of the question. She knew Mason's face too well, and so did Connor. Mason had no intention of being recognized and caught. He carefully planned every step of the crime, fully aware the police would come knocking later. But he counted on having just enough misdirection to throw them off. In his twisted blueprint, the nanny was the weakest link. She had a routine. She always took Tommy for walks along the same roads at the same time. Luck sided with Mason one Wednesday afternoon. He watched from a distance as the nanny, pushing a stroller with Tommy sleeping soundly, left the gated area and followed a quiet forest path to a clearing where she met up with another nanny from a nearby neighborhood. The two women chatted and laughed, completely unaware of who was lurking nearby. Not wanting to attract suspicion, Mason stopped his daily spying after that. He narrowed it down to Wednesdays only, the day when the nanny's pattern repeated like clockwork. Week after week, he confirmed it was flawless. Every Wednesday, she left the safety of the gated community and walked the same secluded path. For 4 Wednesdays, Mason watched, memorizing every step, every moment. By the 4th week, he knew for certain. Next Wednesday, he'd come back, and this time, he wouldn't just watch. At the same time, to carry out his plan, Mason bought a high-powered taser at a local shop, paying in cash so nothing could be traced back to him. He mapped out every detail to avoid getting caught. He also picked up a beat-up old car, stole license plates, and attached them to it himself. He chose a discreet spot to park, close enough for a quick getaway, but far enough not to draw attention. He even thought about how he looked, taking steps to disguise his build and cover his face so no one would recognize him. The thought of kidnapping Tommy consumed him. He fell asleep and woke up replaying it in his mind, even dreaming about every step like a twisted movie playing on repeat. As the chosen day drew closer, Mason lost nearly 15 pounds and looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. One glance at him and anyone could see he was dangerous. His eyes twitched with obsession, and his face looked drawn and wired. On Wednesday, he parked the car exactly where he'd planned and waited. When he spotted the nanny pushing Tommy's stroller along the quiet path, he felt a shiver run through him. All his careful planning suddenly felt disconnected from the brutal reality of what he was about to do. This wasn't some video game. It was real. A real woman, a real baby, and real consequences. By nature, Mason wasn't a violent man, but his festering hatred for Olivia drowned out every shred of hesitation. He forced himself forward. He lunged at the nanny, shoving her away from the stroller and sending her sprawling onto the dirt path. Before she could scream, he fired the taser. The crackling shock dropped her limp to the ground. Panting, Mason bent over the stroller to unbuckle Tommy and snatch him away. But that's when everything fell apart. Out of nowhere, something smashed into the side of his head. The impact sent him sprawling. Dazed, he barely registered an older man standing over him, yelling and cursing as he bound Mason's wrists with a piece of rope. Mason's vision went black as he lost consciousness. The man who stopped him was Mr. Turner, a veteran forest ranger well known in the upscale communities nearby. His ranger cabin sat hidden in the dense woods between 2 gated neighborhoods, a detail Mason had completely overlooked. Later, Mr. Turner calmly explained everything to the police. "I was walking back from the store when I saw this guy loitering near the path, all dressed in black, sweating like crazy despite the heat. I figured I'd better keep an eye on him. Years in this forest taught me how to move quiet as a fox, so I stayed hidden behind a tree and watched. Then I saw him attack the woman, knocked her right down. At first I thought it was a mugging, but then I realized he was going for the baby. That's when I knew I had to stop him. I ran up and hit him with a branch I'd picked up just in case," Mr. Turner explained later. "Well done, Mr. Turner. You're the local hero now. Look, the reporters are already gathering. They want an interview. Just sign this police report and go enjoy your fame," one of the officers said with a grin. "I'm not going to them. I don't care about that nonsense," Mr. Turner replied calmly, then slipped back to his cabin by a winding path so no one could follow him. Mr. Turner didn't feel like he'd done anything heroic. In his mind, anybody would have done the same. How could he stand by when innocent people needed help? A few hours later, Connor showed up at Mr. Turner's door. "Hello, I'm Tommy's father, the boy you rescued today. He's a good kid. He settled down as soon as I held him. So brave, so smart. Thank you truly. It's a blessing you were there at the right time," Connor said, his voice breaking, eyes wet. The day's chaos had left him raw. "Tell me, how can I ever repay you?" "What are you talking about? No need for that," Mr. Turner said, genuinely puzzled by the gratitude. But Connor pressed him, so Mr. Turner finally chuckled. "Well, if you insist, maybe a new hunting jacket and some good food for my old dog wouldn't hurt." "Done. Absolutely no problem," Connor promised. Then, hesitating, he added, "If you don't mind me asking, Do you think Mason did all this just for money? Oh, it's worse than that, Connor sighed. It's a long story. If you're willing, I've got time, Mr. Turner said with a nod. I live out here cut off from everything. I don't get stories like this every day. Encouraged, Connor told him everything. Olivia's illness, their unusual decision for Connor to father her child, Olivia's death, Mason's spite, and how it all spiraled into revenge. He admitted that the investigator had explained how Mason's pride and rage drove him, not just greed. For Connor, saying it out loud to an unbiased stranger felt like a weight lifting off his chest. Sometimes I wonder if we pushed him to this, if we made him this crazy, Connor said after pouring his heart out. If it were just me, I could live with it, but all this ended up falling back on Tommy. His voice dropped to a whisper. And what if, one day Tommy hates me for not saving her, for not protecting her enough? That thought scares me more than anything. Oh, for heaven's sake, are you serious? Mr. Turner scoffed. You're a grown man asking that? That Mason of yours would have always found some excuse. He married for money, cheated shamelessly, mistreated his sick wife, then blamed her when she fought back. She hit him where it hurt, his wallet. Good for her. She planned it smart and pulled it off. She owed him nothing. The blunt truth from a plain-spoken stranger somehow soothed Connor's guilt. He took Mr. Turner's words to heart and smiled gratefully. Well, I owe you for your honesty too then, he said. Mr. Turner waved it off with a grin, and they shook hands like old friends. Before Connor left, Mr. Turner added warmly, You know, there's an old saying, if you save a life, you're responsible for it forever. So don't worry, I'll always keep an eye on your Tommy too. True to his word, Mr. Turner visited often and became a beloved guest in Connor's home. For Tommy, the ranger was like another grandparent, one more piece of the family that loved him fiercely. Meanwhile, the court sentenced Mason to several years in prison. While he sat behind bars, everyone at Connor's house slowly found peace again. Mr. Harrison visited regularly, carrying out every promise he'd made to Olivia. Over time, Connor met a single mother whose little girl was in Tommy's kindergarten class. The kids got along like siblings, and Connor's parents quietly hoped this new love would blossom, that maybe Tommy would have a stepmother and a sister, maybe even more siblings someday. But no matter how life moved forward, Connor never let Tommy forget his real mother. He always talked about Olivia, showed him pictures and videos, and reminded him over and over that she loved him more than anything, and that even if he couldn't see her, she was always there, protecting him. So, my dear friends, that's how Olivia's story comes to an end. And yet, maybe for some of you who stayed until this very moment, it's not just a story, is it? If you're still here, then something about Olivia's courage, Connor's quiet loyalty, or even Mr. Harrison's unshakable support must have touched your heart in a way words alone can't explain. You see, life has this stubborn habit of handing us people like Mason, people who take more than they give and drain the light right out of our days. But as the Stoics remind us, as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Olivia lost almost everything she thought made life worth living, yet she found power in her mind and heart. She turned her greatest heartbreak into a shield for her son's future and proof that even when life betrays us, we don't have to betray ourselves. This story is about betrayal, yes, but even more. It's about the choice to love deeply, fight quietly, and protect what truly matters, even if it means leaving behind a plan that blooms only after we're gone. Sometimes our biggest victories don't look like winning. They look like letting go with dignity. So if you're fighting your own battles today, if someone has wronged you, or if you feel alone carrying too much on your shoulders, I want you to remember Olivia's quiet strength. You can choose how to respond. You can choose your legacy. And sometimes, you can be your own hero in ways no one ever sees. If this story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. We're here for each other, always. See you soon, my wonderful friends.